we need to have more real people as candidates. Because in all honesty, we have way too many people that play figures and play roles and have consultants that build their image and play a thing of I know your community, but really have no clue how any of this stuff works. No clue of how any bill process works, no idea how any process of funding, any process of issues, I'm not trying to hear from a person that came from a wealthy family telling me.
Hi everybody, Lee Scott here. Thank you for watching and or listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee, where we talk about life, leadership, and legacy, and we want to help you unleash your capacity and level of leadership. I have a great guest today, but before I introduce him, if you have not done it yet, go and subscribe to Leading with Lee on YouTube and all podcasting platforms. Well, today I have a friend of mine who I've probably known for at least 5 or 6 years now. He is a community organizer. He is a political consultant. He's done so much in the public space, and he also is a candidate for House District 72 in the great state of Oklahoma. Please welcome to Leading with Lee, the incomparable superstar himself, Charles Wilkes Jr. How you doing, bro?
I'm doing great, sir. How are you doing?
I am doing fine. I'm doing fine. So thanks for doing this, Charles. I think people are going to be impacted today by our discussion. And actually maybe thrown off a little bit because we're going to be talking about some stuff today that I typically don't talk about, but I think it is an imperative to talk about this subject that we're going to talk about, but also leadership. So we're going to talk about politics today, but I just want to talk about you, bro. Like, I've known you for a while, and I just want to give you a moment to kind of share your origin story and kind of your background. So you have the floor, bro.
My name is Charles Wilkes. I was born in North Tulsa. I am the youngest of 5 sisters and 2 brothers. I graduated from McLean High School and went to Oklahoma State for political science. I have been an activist. I've been a community organizer. I've been an operative. I've been an advisor. I've been a campaign consultant, campaign manager. I've worked every type of campaign from presidential down to school board. I am a descendant of Greenwood, which is affectionately known as Black Wall Street, as well as a Cherokee citizen. I come from a very humble and rough upbringing, and it has taught me a lot about barriers and issues in our communities. And I have fought in many capacities, whether that's sitting on different boards or organizations. Whether that's dealing with governmental processes and projects, whether that's doing federal grants, whether that's doing, advocacy, whether that's protesting on the street, right? At every point of advocacy in politics, I've been very active, and I'm blessed to continue that process.
Yeah. And I've known some of that and got to witness some of that from an organizer perspective, and seeing you in the background doing a lot of work and engaging people. So let's talk about that a little bit more, Charles. You have been involved, as you've stated, have been involved in this space probably the vast majority of your life, right?
Yeah, more than half.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit more. What kind of drew you towards public service or just that space? Like, what kind of brought you to this space?
Well, first family. As a baby, I took naps at city council meetings and community meetings and protests and organizing and all that kind of stuff. My mom was pretty active. My cousins are active. My grandparents are active. And so it's in my blood, right? But it's also been stewarded in me that always to do for other people and always help other people, whether we did, back to school events or taking back the community, or speaking to people of power about issues about young people, whether that's being a school ambassador or a district ambassador, or just different capacities. I've always had the gift of gab and the ability to connect people for like-minded issues to make something happen, and also had a strategy mind of how we actually get it done.
Yeah. I mean, and that's necessary, especially now with so much going on. So we're about to really get into it, because you and I have been talking over the years here and there about different things that have been happening throughout society. And I I, as a person who, for the most part, has not been in the public space, at least in that regard, it's always interesting to get your perspective because you've been behind the curtain a whole lot and you have seen people who say things in front of people but are very different behind closed doors. So let's talk a little bit about civic engagement. You know, as we look at the current political landscape and we see so much stuff happening around us, what are some of your thoughts about how we as the public can engage civically, or is even that a conversation we should be even having?
Um, it is the most important conversation we should be having at this point, right? We have the least amount of people being involved in civic engagement in today's time. We have the least amount of people knowing who their mayor is, knowing who their city councilor is, knowing who their state rep or their senator, or even most people don't even know their governor in today's time, right?
Yeah.
But people know about the president, right? People know about that type of seat, right? And it's built that way. Civic engagement is not taught in the same way in school. It is not really invested in. And if my parents didn't vote, you know, it's more likely I'm not going to vote, right?
Right.
And so we've now had generations that have been stewarded to be way more towards entertainment and drama and you know, all that type of stuff versus what they are responsible for. You know, at the end of the day, whether you put your influence in it or not, somebody's making a decision on behalf of you every single day.
Absolutely.
Right? And so there's no way on God's green earth that I am going to allow somebody to make a decision on my behalf without also having my input and my fingerprint on every decision that goes along that I have the ability to have access to. And I'm thankful that I have had access to a lot of them these days.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a great point, Charles, because I think one of the things that we are hardened to understand is like so many people maybe unconsciously disenfranchise themselves where they think that if I go to the polls or if I go engage in an election, like for instance, many, you know, we'll talk about this here in a moment, but many of us don't realize, like I know here in Mississippi, we have an election coming up here in about a month. We have statewide elections, like we're electing our governor and lieutenant governor and all the statewide seats and our public service commissioners and our public transportation commissioners and literally electing all the state house and state senate seats and even some county supervisor roles are up for election.
Right.
Do you think people might be a little bit overwhelmed by the prospect of having to make decisions about their lives every 4 years?
Yes, but I think that's why it takes a sum total, right? It's not me individually. If I do my part and then another person comes and does their part, and then another person comes and does their part, the load is a lot easier, right? I think the problem is that there are too few of us trying to stretch all the work out, right? And we are over capacity, right? So it looks way more daunting. And also, it has to do with the type of things that we're fighting. I can't fight poverty by myself. That's not, that is a system. And a system requires a system to fight it, right? There are only really two real systems in the world. There's organized people and organized money. And I don't got that much money. So I need to organize some people to get some things done.
Right.
And historically, if we look at things, organized people have always overcome when we finally have come together to say, no, this is not going to happen. This is what needs to change. Because, you know, human capital is the most inconsistent capital, but it's also the most precious capital at the end of the day. If you can get people involved and to really stay involved in a process, that really changes it, right? This country was not made by, you know, just 10 people decide, no, we're going to come together and we're going to do this. No, there were ships and ships and ships and ships and agreements and other people getting involved and partnerships with other countries and all these other things that made it what it is. We can't do that just me on my own block, right?
Yeah.
Now, I have the ability to affect some things on my own block because there's not that many of us, right? But then if we take 2 and 3 and 4, and then we say, let's affect our neighborhood. And then we grow from there and let's affect the city. And then let's affect the county. Let's affect the state. We have to really get more people understanding the issues that affect their households first. Because if the water is affecting me, right? The electricity is affecting me. My food access is affecting me. My health access is affecting me. If I can connect the issues down to your house first and do it backwards up, that teaches you the navigation of who are the decision makers and who's hurt by these issues and who's benefiting from these issues.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, Charles, that's probably the best answer we could give on this issue because, I mean, you know this to be true. I mean, you've been in these spaces where there seems to be a concerted effort to ensure that a community doesn't get what they need, and creating a lot of barriers to entry to ensure, hey, we're not only going to make sure they don't get what they need, but we're going to do everything we can to stop them from realizing they have more power than they have. Right? And one of the things that's happening, man, one of the things that's happening right now here in Mississippi is we had primaries back in August, right? When this comes out, it'll be almost literally a month to the day of the election for our state, all up and down ticket.
Gotcha.
With all of that being at stake, when I tell you, man, there was such angst among the people in our communities where we had higher turnout than usual in some areas, but in some areas the turnout was so low that it was like I know there's X amount of people that probably live in this area, and there might be 50 or 60,000 voters, but we had 3,000 people vote. Or in this area, we might have 5,000 people vote. Or in this area, we had 10,000 people vote. And it's like, y'all, you're talking about a fraction of the populace is actually influencing what happens. But let's kind of stay right there a little bit. Why do you think, because we're talking about engagement, but why do you think it's so hard for us to figure that out? Do you think it's an information issue? Like, what do you think are some of the reasons why people may or may not be getting involved?
Okay, I'm going to ruffle some feathers here.
Uh-oh.
So let's just go ahead and go there. So when you think about areas that have the most nonprofit impact, and the areas that have the most churches, and the areas that have the most need and lack, those are the areas that have the least involvement, the least civic engagement, and the least points of political change.
Wow.
And I'm going to be honest with you, nobody works their stuff out of a job. Nobody. That includes nonprofits. That includes churches. That includes philanthropics. That includes all those people that are part of the structure of need and issues that sometimes only want a little bit of change over time. Oh, that's too much change for us. That's too much change. You're working me out of a job. You're working me. You're starting to get ahead of me. You're starting to get a little too much ownership. You're starting to get a little too much. I can figure it out. I don't need you, because at the end of the day, organizations are not organized people. Organized people are organized people. I cannot say as an organization that I am the community, that I am everybody, and that I speak for everybody. It takes a sum total of everybody coming together. And think about it, in those type of communities where survival takes place the most, it is the most I place, right? It is the most I, my for, no more, right? Yep. And those organizations and those leaders and those people also insulate those issues by the silos, by the fractions, by the hoarding of grants and the cheating the game and the selling out and the playing the good folk or playing the bad folk or playing the role while you're doing other stuff undercover. It is an insulated problem. It is a very insulated problem. And I think sometimes we place it on the people way more than we should, right? Because the people see the problems and they see what's going on and they see who's really doing for them and they see who don't. They see the organizations that I'll give you some food this week, but then I also go and advocate for the law that needs to change for food deserts. I keep that law the same. Woo! So let's talk about the people that do stuff on both sides of the aisle to keep their place in power.
Yeah.
So we got to talk about, I'm big on criticizing leadership and those with influence way more than I am a regular person.
Yeah.
because it's the system that keeps a person thinking that their power doesn't matter in the first place.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Charles, that's such a great response because I mean, obviously, it's a leadership podcast, so I always talk about all these different subjects. But one of the fundamental things that I believe is that every person has capacity and level of leadership, and
Mm-hmm.
and inherent in that belief is people recognizing, hey, I can be on my city council member's head, or my city, or my school board leader's head, or my mayor's head,
Mm-hmm.
or all these individuals' head about what they're not doing, because the reality is you live in your neighborhood, you live in your communities, right? Like you know what's happening. I know we got to move on, but let's talk about the flip side of that, because sometimes even as voters we have to take some responsibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if you're a candidate, you know what you're doing, right? You're out here you're already probably setting up meet and greets. You're probably already setting up opportunities for people to engage you about policy. You're probably setting up town
Right.
halls right now, right? Like you're doing all of that work. What do you think is the big how can we get voters to recognize that, like, there are people like you that are actually trying to give them information. There are people like you that are actually out there in the street trying to engage them.
All
And
right.
sometimes
I'm about to ruffle some feathers again.
I know, but there are people that are actually trying to engage the public, trying to do all the work. Like, they're knocking doors, they're engaging voters, they're doing everything they can to try to engage people as it relates to the issues. But for some reason, the voters are having some issues. What are some of your thoughts about that, man?
I love this, and I'm going to be honest, and I know for a fact I'm going to ruffle some feathers with this answer. We need to have more real people as candidates, because in all honesty, we have way too many people that play figures and play roles, and have consultants that build their image and play a thing of I know your community, but really have no clue how any of
Wow.
this stuff works. No clue of how any bill process works. No idea how any process of funding, any process of issues, any like have not. I'm not trying to hear from a person that came from a wealthy family telling me about impoverished communities. I'm not. You can't tell me anything about an impoverished community because I've lived it. I've known what it is not to have electricity. I've known what it is not to have water. I've known what it is not
Come
to
on.
have food. I've known what it is to be on the street. So you cannot tell me
Right.
that point because I have experience in it, right?
Yes.
You can tell me all the statistics all day if you want,
Yes.
but I have the narrative because
Yes.
I've lived it. It is in my DNA. It's in my trauma.
Come on, Char. And you know that's different.
Exactly.
There is an impact
You
when
can't
you have
fake
lived
that.
it.
You can't fake that. You can give all the theories, you can give all the logical points, you can give all the overlay strategies, all the high level points that you want,
Absolutely.
but you cannot replace what I have had to endure and had to get through. Last week, I spoke to a group of people, and I spoke after one of my opponents, and I decided to take it a different way. He kind of did some chanting and some other stuff, and I was like, I'm not here to rile people up. I'm here to talk about some serious things. And one of the things I talked about is that, in all honesty, resiliency should be a curse word. Because why are we talking about and praising resiliency while we're upholding and keeping the same barriers that make stories like mine an anomaly, right? I'm not okay with being an anomaly past statistics while so many people are succumbing to those statistics,
right,
and are not making it, right? That's not something we should be patting on the back, be happy, why you can't be like him, why you can't be like that. No, it is built that way that if you know my name, obviously it's not happening that often. That's a regular thing.
Yep.
I come from a single parent home. My dad was in prison most of my childhood. I come from a home, very humble beginnings. I have a lot of trauma. I was abused. I was in foster care at one point. I dealt with a lot of trauma, right? But still yet I've been able to achieve the things that I've been able to achieve and walk the walks that I have, and I'm just 30, right? But that's an anomaly. How many people do you know with that type of background that has that type of influence in politics and governmental processes and writing federal grants and managing $100 million things for the city? Like, there are very few people in the world who is capable of doing that. And that's with people with proper education and proper families. So think of how many people do it with the type of background I have. And I didn't finish college. So think about that from an aspect of why do we love to present that point like it's excellence when it's really enduring? Do you know how many scars I have?
Yeah.
Do you know how many nightmares I have? Do you know
Yeah.
how much I struggle to sleep? Do you know how even right now my life is in a transition? I'm having to reset and deal with my childhood traumas and parental traumas and all of that. We don't talk about that side of resiliency. It comes with a lot of scars and a lot of problems, right? But we preach it to these kids and we preach it to these people like you just got to overcome, pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
Come
How am I
on.
going to do that with lesions on my
Talk
feet?
about it, Charles.
And so we don't
Tell
talk
the
about the
truth.
damage that comes from having to go that path and go that direction. But we highlight it and say, oh, be happy. But when I go home, I'm broken.
Yep.
So let's
Exactly.
talk about real people. You know,
Exactly.
in this time, I've been very honest about my process and I've been posting. I've said, pray for me. I've had people come and have to walk with me in this process because it's not cool to talk about this in this way. And it's easy for people that never had to go through it to talk about resiliency. It's easy, but you're not seeing the scars. You're not seeing the damage. You're not seeing the fears, the anxiety, the high strung, the mental health issues, the things that come along with dealing with that. And so I circle it back to the thing. We don't have real people running, to be honest, sir. That's the real thing. And I think the thing is that just like when you see that random person that walks in and looks weird and is acting kind of antsy and being standoffish, but when they go on the stage, they act like a whole other person. They can preach, they tell off and all that. No, they're performing. I'm not looking for performance. I want something real. Can you make the deal or not? Can you get the bill done or not? Can we get some funding or not? Can we get the thing? I'm not here for a performance. I'm not here for a holler back. I'm not here for a good speech. I'm here for what can we make happen and change.
Oh,
that's the only reason why I care to do any of this work.
Charles, listen, I'm trying not to get fired up. Cause see, you know, I'm not one of your constituents. But you know, you just fired me up. And that's absolutely true. There is so much of this gauzy perfectionistic thing in public life. And it's so crazy because you know this to be true, and I know this to be true. Half of these people are absolute jerks. They are disingenuous people. Now listen, let me be very clear. I know this is my podcast and blog, and there's probably somebody, you know, gonna pull this up years from now and say, well, he said all this about people, you know. So I understand the risk. And
hit dog will holler.
Huh?
Hit dog will holler.
Well, that's the truth.
This country fantasizes trauma.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Because we don't realize that at the end of the day, if we don't deal with it, if we don't actually address issues head on, we're going to keep bleeding and nobody's going to get healed. And so I know we got to move on, but I loved your answer because that is a real thing. And I think as we go forward in trying to make a difference in our culture, we're going to need people who have unique sexual experience. I will beg to differ to say this. I think some of the reason why our political system is broken is because, and to your point, a lot of these people come out of the same spaces. So you absolutely right. You're talking about real people. We need bus drivers. We need folks who were caterers and folks who had a business, but it wasn't in the financial world. And we need folk who were actually educated. Like, we need all of those people in public life because for some reason we tend to overvalue attorneys and we tend to overvalue individuals that work for this senator or work for this legislator, and we see that as experience. And I truly believe this, Charles. All experience is not equal.
Exactly.
And also, let's be clear, all experience is not good experience.
Exactly.
Because one of the things that we do, we oversell this experience piece like, oh, well, they worked for Congressman such and such for 6 years.
Right.
Well, they could have been up there doing nothing for 6 years. They literally could have not been actually.
What skills have you gotten?
They literally could not
be to the paper. Let's test it out.
Come on now. And if they actually could not be moving paper to actually improve the quality of life for people. But we use that as the bar. And we got to get better at that. Man, we got to move on. Because we could stay there all day, Charles, and I'm not about to have you doing it to me, because we got other stuff to talk about. So my next question, we kind of touched on this a little before. Obviously, as I mentioned, Mississippi is about to have an election here in about 4 weeks. And you and I both know this, but you and I know that there are elections every year. There's no such thing as off years.
A couple times a year, right?
Exactly, a couple times, because people forget that there are primaries. Some people forget that there are even special elections that are held at weird parts of the year.
Sometimes there's state questions. Sometimes there's city bonds. Sometimes there's county bonds. Sometimes there's tax increases. Sometimes there's a lot.
There's a lot. And so how can people stay motivated? Because let's be clear, we need to challenge voters, but what about folks that are engaged? What are some ways you think they can stay motivated and engaged in every cycle? Because at some point, one of the complaints has been from voters has been like, I'm been exhausted. I just voted. And like, I went out there and knocked doors for this individual. I knocked doors for this candidate. And I did all these different things. Now you're telling me there's another election in 6 months? Like, how can we really stay engaged in that regard?
You know what it is? Too often times how we have strategized organizing has been around individuals, or it's been around organizations.
Yeah.
But the problem is that you need to base it around the issue, because that's where my real motivation comes from, right?
Wow.
If I base it around the issue and I understand that it is a systematic process, then my committing understanding is for a lot longer than just this election process that I know is over in a certain amount of time, right?
Absolutely.
When I understand that it's not about people and personalities and all of that, but it's about, real change process, real impact process that changes my view about how I go. Like, I learn differently, because when I'm learning about the issue, I may be cool with you about this issue, but not cool with you about this issue. There are no permanent allies and no permanent enemies, right? And so, I work with both sides of the aisle. I've had a lot of dealings with both sides, right? And it's with the understanding that where the things that we can agree we can make happen work, we're going to make work. But where we cannot agree, I'm going to be a thorn in your side. And so absolutely. I need you to understand that this is the principle about how we go about it. In our political structure, it's been too individual and face-based, right? It's been, we got to stick to the party. We got to stick to the party. I don't care as much about the parties. I care enough about making my city street safe. As much as I care about our infrastructure, as much as I care about our water, our climate, as much as I care about mental health, as much as I care about incarceration, reintegration, as much as I care about, maternal child health, as much as those issues now, that's what gets me up in the morning. That's what gets me to say, all right, we're going to make some moves right here with this and this and this and this. Absolutely. Going to go see a state rep is not going to get me up in the morning. It's not. I'm telling you now. I spend probably the least amount of time at the Capitol and City Hall that I ever have. But I'm doing and I'm making more actions happen from a distance way more than I ever have, right? It's because we spend so much time about meetings and town halls and all this other stuff. And that's the presentation for the work. That's not the work. So let me show you how the work goes. Because just coming to present right there, that's just a demonstration of what we have been doing.
Exactly.
That is how you call the sign. That's the call sign to everybody to say a war is starting or a battle was starting.
Exactly.
Not to say this is the fight and now we done, we all go home. I yelled at them and I said my little piece and now I go home and they go vote the same way they was going to vote anyway. No, how I do it is I'm going to come say my piece, and I know constituents in every single one of your districts. And so I can impede your voting process to see if you're going to get back in. And you really don't want a person like me advocating for your opponent. So there's a different conversation when you come in with those leverages. People don't respond to morality as much as they used to no more. They respond to leverage power. Leverage power. If I can leverage to make sure that your own constituent is going to be coming up here and making a noise to you, you're going to deal with me differently, right? Because you understand that my bandwidth in my area of territory exceeds just my neighborhood.
Wow.
Right? So when I go anywhere in the state, it is a conversation of how do you want this to go? Because I can find some people in your neighborhood I can find some people in the area because it's about issues.
Yeah.
And if they connect with the issues, we could have nothing else in common. They could be blue collar, I could be city lick. I could be black, they can be white. I could be whatever. But at the end of the day, if we agree on this issue, we're gonna ride this issue out.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's how we have to find commonalities of people. Everybody wants a safe neighborhood. Everybody wants clean water. Everybody wants a good school. Everybody wants all those things. Now, how we are going about getting it done is the intricacies that we need to figure out.
Right.
But if we want the same goal, then let's advocate for the same goal.
Yep. Charles, like, dude, everything you said was on the money. And it made me think about something that really impacted me earlier this year during the legislative session. I know we're about to go to break real quick, but it's something that happened during the legislative session that I thought was super profound. And this woman that really, 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 who I've come in contact with over the last year, her name is Angela Grayson. She runs or is involved with the Black Women's Roundtable here in Mississippi. And they have been pushing for Medicaid. They've been pushing for Medicaid expansion. Obviously, you know, most conservative states in our country are vehemently against Medicaid expansion, right? But they focused on one specific issue, which was trying to extend women's access to postpartum care, which we only give about 3 months for some reason here in Mississippi, postpartum care from the state, which is, you know, another travesty within itself, but that's another conversation for another day. I may make some people upset by me saying that. But needless to say, they were able to get women who may not agree with them on any other issue to push the state legislature to do something about it. And literally in the 11th hour, the Speaker of the House here in Mississippi have been blocking it for years, have been blocking it. He decides to recuse himself. And then in the 11th hour, our Republican governor, which I'll give him credit for this, signed it into law. And it was passed overwhelmingly through the state legislature. But it goes with what you said. People focused on the issue and they were able to bring people together that genuinely probably wouldn't give a crap about each other as it relates to this issue. But it was because of the work you're talking about. I think that's such a great perspective to have. And I have so much more to ask you about, Charles. But we're going to take a break right here for a moment. We'll be right back after this message. Hi, everybody. Lee here, and I want to give some information to you. Do you need someone to host an event or come and speak at your event? You can now book yours truly. Book me for your event by visiting www.leeascott.com. I am so excited to connect with you and do work with you. Much love, and let's get started. And we are back. I'm so excited that you are still here. And if you've been watching and paying attention, this is a phenomenal exposition and conversation about why we need to be engaged politically in our culture and our society. And I thank Charles so much for being with me on here and just talking about the subject. So I got a few more questions for you, Charles. I know we talked about so much before the break, but what do you think are some of the biggest challenges in the political system, and how do you think that looks in the future? Because obviously, I don't care what your political beliefs are, we are in the fight of our lives, particularly about our democracy right now. Because there are people who, for whatever reason, no matter where they're on the spectrum, do not believe in the system. So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges? And what do you think we can do to really look at the future differently?
Okay, let's start. So, voting rights, number one. Voting rights Absolutely. And voting security. That's number one, right? When we're making so many rules to keep people from being able to vote, from people getting to register properly, you got to have your ID, you got to have all these other things. You can't have a snack in line. You got to get in line by this time. You got to this, you got to that, you got to that, you got to that. I gave you the wrong ballot. You're going to jail for making a mistake on the ballot. You know, all these things, all these fear mongering things.
Oh,
right? Yeah. And I, I've always, heard this statement, and I really believe in it. They wouldn't be trying to take it from you if it didn't matter.
Absolutely.
And let's go to the second thing. our advocacy process is in shambles, right? We are not connecting to real people in a real meaningful way. We talk about theories and we talk about bills and we talk about high level problems and systematic issues and all those things, right? But when I'm at the door, I can't be talking about all this high level things
Yep.
because they've heard all of that. All of those are just hot buzzwords. Hot buzzwords like I use in an interview for earned media, right? That's not going to have an impact on them when you leave. That's going to be like, oh, that was nice. That was cool. Somebody came to the door. No, what you need to talk about is, hey, man, I see people flying up and down your street. Y'all need some speed bumps.
Yep.
I see a lot of stray dogs out here. We need animal control over here.
Yep.
I see a bunch of cars in people's yards. I see, a lot of issues with that. Y'all need to come do some cleanup around here. I see some grass not being cut. I see some houses that need some remodeling. I see too many abandoned houses in your neighborhood. What can we do to alleviate that? What can I do that actually you can see impact, right? Yep. One of the things about us as people is that we got to see a win somewhere.
Yep.
We got to see some progress somewhere. And if I see the little bit of progress, it's the same way you think about advocacy, the same way you think about going to the gym, right? For those first couple of weeks, you're going to be sore. You're going to be trying to work out through the soreness, right? But then you look in the mirror that one time after that second, you're like, hold on, did I lose couple little inches? Did I lose that just a little bit? And it makes you say, you know what, I could go another week. I could do it a little bit longer. I could do it before long. Instead of a chore, it becomes an outlet.
Oh, yeah.
Because now it's a way of how you impact something. You're impacting something yourself. And then that same structural process is the same way you got to do advocacy. You have to do it in impact basis, right? Nobody ever wants to work a job. Nobody ever wants to be a part of a project. Nobody wants to be a part of a relationship. Nobody wants to be a part of anything that they don't see any progress on.
Yep.
Nobody. And the problem is when we talk about advocating, we take too many losses. We lose too much. And you're going to lose people when I've been in this for 4 years and I took all losses. Oh, I'm gone, bro. I'm going to the house, bro. It's so much to walk beside somebody and then feel like it was all for nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, absolutely.
I don't want to hear a whole hoopla of a candidate and hear all of this and we go do all this fighting and we go do all this. We done spent all this time and then we get washed.
Oh, yeah.
Hold on, bro. How we only get a quarter of the vote? What happened?
Yep.
What was we doing?
Yep.
What was the point of this?
Yep.
No, nobody wants to deal with that. Me included. Yes. I have struggled in this 16-year time being in this process when I was like, bro, we taking too many losses. We're not making no changes. We keep doing the same strategy. We keep doing the same thing. We keep expecting either 100% change or 0% change instead of making compromises for incremental change. Where are we at in our progress? Where are we at in our strategy? Where are we at in our plan? Where are we at in our things? No, I need to see something because I'm spending money. I'm spending time, blood, sweat, and tears. I'm taking time away from my family. I'm taking time away from my job and my own future career process. So no, I need to see some change. And the problem is that we do a lot of pipe dreams and we build a lot of fantasy building, but we're not really making small changes that people can see in their daily process. And yeah, people are going to drop off when it comes to that. That's why when you see an unveiling of a groundbreaking, you see 1,000 people. But by the time it get done, there's about 100.
Yep.
Because everybody's not meant to go that long haul of process, especially when they're not a part of the pieces of change that need to be happening. You have to give people something to do. And it can't be just the busy work all day and night. Oh, just go send a letter to your candidate about 30,000 times or the elected official. So no, I'm going to get tired of that. No, actually give me a real job. Actually give me talking points. Actually help me to go leverage, get some more people. Give me real work to do. We bring a lot of people to be spectators. We don't bring a lot more people to teach them how to organize on their own.
Yeah.
And we have to teach people how to weaponize on their own. One of the things that I during the time of COVID, Dave Chappelle did his little special that he did, right? And one of the things that people kept saying was asking him, why are you not out talking? He said, the people are speaking for themselves. I don't got to say nothing. And think about it. How many, there were billions, you couldn't point out an individual leader. You could not point out, oh, this is the person that's doing the movement. No, there were thousands of leaders. And if you move one, another one about to step up. Because good luck.
And to your point, bro, and let me just say real quick, and I'll let you keep going. That's probably one of the fundamental problems too. We too busy trying to we're doing that same thing. And bro, I'm gonna tell the story real quick and I'm gonna let you keep going. But literally, I was at a meeting one time with some business leaders, and there were some other, there were academics in there, there's a pastor in there, like all these people were older than me. And one of the gentlemen said, at one time we had Martin and Fred Shuttlesworth and Abernathy. And it's like, yes, but in this day and time, we don't need an individual. We need a people understanding what they're supposed to do. And I think about it this way, Charles. Right now, we're dealing with guerrilla warfare. One of the reasons why we were I'm going to say this, and some people may not agree with me, but one of the reasons why it took America so long to get out of Iraq and Afghanistan, particularly Afghanistan, is because it wasn't that they removed the leader and then was able to install another leader and it went on. It was they moved Saddam Hussein, and then all these people that they didn't even know about just popped up out of nowhere. Al-Qaeda popped out of nowhere. All these people just started doing stuff that they didn't even realize was involved in actually affecting that nation. And he was the one that was holding it back. He wasn't the one that actually was perpetrating the issue. And I'm not saying, now listen, I'm not here to say Saddam Hussein was good at all. Let's be very clear about that. But let's also acknowledge that they started dealing with guerrilla warfare. And so you got U.S. soldiers out here walking in areas and walking and doing things and getting killed by IEDs or getting shot at, sniped down because they didn't know who the enemy was.
Because it wasn't about personalities. It was about the issues. It's about the issue.
Absolutely.
And one thing about problems is that it creates navigation for leadership. And so when you think about the civil rights movement and the women's rights movement and all of those, the fallacy that happened to why it wasn't continuation, because there was a lot of shooting stars. And a lot of shooting stars. And everybody gravitated to them and everybody centered around them. And what happens to our leaders when we magnetize them a little too much? They die.
Yep.
Let's have a real conversation here. You make it easy, because if I know if that person goes away, so does the movement process. And as much as they tried to keep it going, when they lost people like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Fred Hampton, it was a wrap. It was a wrap. Wasn't nobody about to, with all due respect, wasn't nobody about to follow Jesse. Nobody was about to jump. Like, everybody was like, nah, bro, I was with Martin. I wasn't, they cool, but I was with Martin. And that's the thing, that's the fallacy of that movement. We had a lot of that. We had a lot of organization based. So what happened to organizations? They infiltrated them. They gutted them out. They're now government funded. They're now, they're part of the cycle of the system. They're not as effective as they were at that time.
Yeah.
And that's not to disrespect them. That's not to do any of that. But it's just the fact. We have to do things differently. We have to do things in a way that it's issue based, because the issue, leaders don't rise up for everywhere. When we think about, let's take it there. When we think about kingdom of God, right? And we think about the Bible, we think about all of that. That is just a small portion of what was going on in the whole movement process. There were other civilizations being stood up. There were other things that were going on around the world of process. And think about a lot of people in the Bible did not have happy endings. Shooting stars do not have happy endings. Let's have a real conversation about that. And so I'm not in this world to be the top leader, to be the HNIC or be the whoever, all that type of thing. I'm in just to be effective and go about my business. A lot of times we glamorize leadership and we glamorize the movement and we glamorize organizing in such a way that builds such fantasy that does not give the realism of the weight and the responsibility that goes along with that, right? If I'm doing all of that advocacy and I'm doing all that stuff that takes a lot of time, somebody's missing me.
Yep.
Something else is lacking. Something else is hurting. And so it costs something. We have to do it in a way that alleviates that cost so much, because there's organized people coming together about issues. Not, I got to run this organization of 1,000 volunteers and I got to figure out how to get everybody moving, everybody going. How we gonna fund this? How do this? Now, my life is in a travesty, to be honest,
Yeah.
because when we think about these leaders that we glorify, and we start to dissect what was going on in their personal lives, and we dissect what was going on in their real processes, these people were unhealthy, they were unhappy, and they died in a really rough ways.
Yeah. Well, let's pep it up. I mean, but you're right. I mean, but you're right. You're so right. But man, we could spend so much more time talking about all these different things. But I'm gonna wrap it up because Charles, this probably might be. I might have to bring you back on here, again, and we had this conversation again. But absolutely, man. Like these, I think these nuggets will help people recognize that they have a role to play in transforming our community and transforming our cities at large. And let's be very clear, the place we are most affected, it is at the municipal level. But we're so disengaged from, okay, I almost went on a whole tangent. Let me not do that. So I've got 3 more questions for you. So what are, besides running the campaign, I tend to ask guests this all the time, but besides running a campaign, what are some things are you reading or you're listening to, or what are some ways are you investing in yourself?
Ooh, so like I said, I'm going through a lot of transitions, and I'm going through a lot of childhood trauma, therapy, a lot of self, search, a lot of that type of thing. Um, so it's several things. I'm reading things about trauma processes. I'm reading things about self discovery and leadership. I'm reading. Look, matter of fact, I'll just look up a couple of them that I have on my Audible. That'll help give. I'm reading T.D. Jakes' Disruptive Thinking.
Great book.
I'm reading book called I'm reading the book called The Body Keeps Score. Brain, mind, and body in the healing of trauma.
Wow.
I'm reading a book called Didn't See It Coming. Overcoming the 7 greatest challenges that no one expects and everyone experiences.
Wow.
And then I'm reading a book called The Mountain is You, Transforming Self-Sabotage into Self-Mastery. That's just 4.
Ooh, we might have a conversation off screen about some of those reads. But that's great. So one of the things I tend to ask every guest that comes on here is this question. Oh, some years ago, I was explaining this some years ago. There's a woman that really impacted my life when I lived in Tulsa. Her name was Celia Armstrong, and she made this statement to me after she really impacted me in such a way. She asked me about paying it forward. And so what are some ways, I know, Charles, you're involved in a lot, but what are some ways that you're specifically paying it forward or investing into people around
you? All right. I'm going to share some stuff I don't really talk about. I can't count how many people I've helped get jobs.
Yeah.
I can't count how many people I've helped with their cases and got them deals. I can't count how many families, I've helped with, different issues between parents and kids. I can't count how many times I've brought food or I've helped get resources to or connect to different organizations. I have different individuals that I mentor that I go to talk about. We could talk about all the issues and all the stuff that's going on, but I stop that and say, how are you doing? Yeah. What's going on with you? How can I help you in your process? One of the things that I've always understood about is that as God is helping me, I'm supposed to be helping somebody else.
Yeah.
Because in that logic of mind, I'm not having to focus on my stuff while he's working on me. So he's doing surgery back here while I'm helping somebody else in their process up here.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a lot of different ways, brother. Like, I have individuals that are helping my campaign that I'm helping to nurture to help them get into that world. I have a consulting company. And, my goal for my consulting company, I've been full-time for the last 2 years in it, right? My goal is to be able to get contracts and literally just give them to people and say, hey, I want you to work this contract.
Wow.
I want you to work it and I'll nurture you and help you get to the point that you can do it, right? Because that's how you build, right? What is the point of being a leader if you can't replicate none of the stuff that you do? if I can't replicate it and help somebody else or help somebody get past the barriers or help somebody move the needle along, those are points of legacy. All
Yep.
these titles and all these awards and all this stuff, that stuff don't mean nothing. What
Yep.
lasting impact did you have on somebody's generational line? What did you change in their DNA process?
Yep.
What generational curse did you help them get over? What thing did you have that's an impact that for the rest of their life they'll remember that was a turning point for me? That seed helped to plant a lot of things in my life. That is, you can't buy that. You can't mimic that. You can't fake that. It has to be real. It has to be on point.
Wow. That was a great answer. And so for my final question, I always ask this question anytime I have people on is what song will you use to describe yourself and why? And listen, you can give me any song because I've got some ratchet songs along the way. But what song will you use to describe yourself and why in this present moment?
Man, I love a lot of songs, but probably Public Service Announcement by Jay-Z.
Okay. Well, that's a wrap. Well, yeah. Charles, thank you, brother, for coming on. It's been so great. I think people are going to be really impacted by what you had to share and all the things that we talked about on this episode. There's so much more we probably could have talked about, but we didn't, indulge ourselves in that regard. But Charles Lamont Wilkes Jr., I know your middle name is not Lamont, but Charles, thank you for coming on, bro. It's been so great to have you on, man.
Thank you for having me. This is great. Definitely want to come back.
All right, brother. Thank you for watching and or listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee. If you have not done it yet, subscribe on YouTube and all podcasting platforms. If you want to get more information and connect with me, visit me at www.leeascott.com or follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Lee A. Scott II or Lee A. Scott II. So, thank you for watching. Much love, and let's get started.